Here is the text rewritten in English, adapted for an American context and formatted specifically for text-to-voice. Numbers written as words, symbols removed. Let us get straight to the point. You were born in Mexico during the 90s, a time when hope devalued faster than the currency. Your biological father left when you were 3 years old. Your mother decided to fill that void with a stepfather whose only talent was turning air into the smell of alcohol. To him, you were not a son. You were an unexploited financial asset. His business model was simple. He sent you to the big intersections under the scorching sun with a clear goal: 50 pesos a day. It might seem like little today, but back then that was triple the minimum wage. If you returned with 49, dinner was a beating. But you quickly understood that waiting for the charity of others is inefficient. Why wait for others to give you money when you can take it yourself? So you stopped begging and started taking. While the other kids cried for coins, you diversified your portfolio into petty theft. Fast hands, an angel face, and zero remorse. Thanks to this mindset, he never hit you for a lack of money again. You learned your first valuable lesson in this world. People live by snatching what they need from others. One day, your agile fingers extracted a treasure from the pocket of a distracted businessman. It was not a wallet. It was the gray brick, a first-generation Game Boy. For the first time, you had absolute control over something in your life. You became so obsessed with those monochromatic pixels that you forgot your daily quota of 50. That night, the beating was inevitable. Sore and humiliated, you hid in a dark corner seeking comfort in your game, thinking that at least you had that small joy. But you made a fatal error. You forgot to mute the volume. That 8-bit electronic beep alerted the beast. Your stepfather snatched it from you. For the first time, the instinct for protection overcame fear, and you hit back. The result was another brutal beating and immediate expulsion into the cold street. Wandering with an empty stomach, you arrived at a nearby bus terminal looking for shelter. There, you saw a driver throw rolls of unused tickets into the trash. In that moment, your criminal brain saw a market opportunity. You could resell them, but there was a technical problem. You needed the specific hole puncher to validate them. The next day, you executed your first hack. You approached a driver with your best face of innocence and asked him where to get the tool for a supposed school project. The human being is always the weakest link in security. He gave you the exact address. You went there and stole it from the store. Everything was ready for your first big hit. With the stolen hole puncher, you had enough tickets to travel for free for the rest of your life. But you cannot eat bus tickets. So you decided to break the market. You started selling the passes to your neighbors for only 10% of their official value. The business was a resounding success. For the first time in your life, your pockets felt heavy. That is where your true vocation was born. You understood that hard work is for those who have no imagination. Fraud, on the other hand, is infinitely scalable. At 12 years old, you were already dreaming of buying your own house. But every financial bubble eventually bursts. They dragged you to the police station, and the officer asked you the most terrifying question possible. Who is your legal guardian? Panic froze your blood. Did you know that if they called your stepfather, he would not come to save you? He would come to fulfill his obligation with his fists. In that moment of desperation, your criminal mind evolved. You stopped being a petty thief and became an actor. You burst into tears with surgical precision. You created a perfect narrative. You were not the mastermind, you were the victim. You told the police that your stepfather forced you to steal, that he ran the empire of fake tickets, and that he beat you if you did not meet the quota. You mixed the undeniable truth of his abuse with the lie of your innocence. The police investigated. The neighbors confirmed the screams and the violence. Your plan worked perfectly. The police saw a helpless child, not a potential con artist. Your stepfather was arrested, and you were handed over to the foster care system. Destiny smiled upon you. They assigned you to a young, sterile couple with a lot of money. Not only did you escape jail, but you had just received a massive social promotion. In your new home, you received everything you lacked before. Hot food, a soft bed, and parents who adored you. But what really captured your soul was not the love. It was a beige box. The computer. This was light years ahead of your old gray brick. You became obsessed. You spent every waking second in front of the screen. To satisfy your curiosity, your parents hired a private tutor. It was their worst mistake. He taught you the syntax, but you discovered the language of God. Programming. A world where you were the creator and the rules were absolute. Then came the boom of the internet. Did you realize a fascinating truth? Most users treated their computers like magical toasters. They knew nothing about computer security. To prove your theory, you created a malicious code disguised as a digital love letter. Human stupidity and curiosity did the rest. More than 100,000 people opened the email expecting a secret romance, but they received your punishment. Their screens locked with an infinite loop of an animated cat shaking its rear end. You did not ask for a ransom. Money is vulgar when you have power. You just wanted to prove that you could humiliate the world from your bedroom. You began an unstoppable streak of hacks, exploiting not software flaws, but human ignorance. Your victims were so numerous that the press gave you your first noble title, the hacker of the cat shaking its rear. One day you got bored of playing with small fish. Your ego needed a real challenge, so you aimed at the biggest predator in the ocean, the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA. But you did not use supercomputers or lasers. You used something much more dangerous: patience. Through a few lines of command and a lot of open-source research, you searched the personal networks of high-ranking officials. You discovered a hilarious truth. The most powerful spies in the world are terrible at protecting their own privacy. You found pet names, home addresses, phone numbers, and anniversary dates. These small details that people disregard are the keys to the kingdom. You chose your prey, the director of the CIA himself. Here you executed your masterpiece of vishing or voice phishing. You used voice modulation software that you programmed yourself to sound not like a teenager, but like a middle-aged man tired of life. You called the technical support of his internet and phone provider. The operator, a poorly paid employee who just wanted to finish his shift, asked you the standard security questions. Thanks to your research, you had all the answers. In less than 5 minutes, you reset his password. Now you had total control of the personal email of the chief of spies. And there you found it, the Holy Grail, an attached file with a security clearance request. This document contained social security numbers, medical histories, and dark secrets of thousands of intelligence agents. You could have sold this to foreign powers. You could have dismantled the United States espionage network and caused a war. But you did not do it. Money did not matter to you. You just wanted to leave your signature on the wall to prove you were smarter than them. The next day, you began data mining. You did not read random files. You applied graph theory to map out relationships. Soon, the isolated fragments formed a terrifying mosaic. You discovered that the line between the government and organized crime is not a barrier. It is a revolving door. You saw fund transfers, encrypted emails, and operation orders that confirmed the unthinkable. The agency was not fighting the cartels. It was managing them. Instability in conflict zones was not a failure of foreign policy. It was a feature of the system designed to maintain the flow of black money. You felt like a god watching the strings that move the world. But while you were lost in your conspiracy theories, they were tracking your digital footprint. Arrogance made you careless. The director of the CIA did not call the local police. That would be too bureaucratic. He sent a black ops team. Men without badges, without flags, and without warrants, operating illegally on foreign soil. National sovereignty is just a suggestion for these people. They were already at your door. They did not ring the bell. They took down the entrance with a battering ram. The sound of splintering would mix with the screams of your adoptive parents. They were handcuffed on the floor without understanding why their house was full of paramilitaries speaking tactical English. The agents burst into your room, ready to neutralize the target, but they only found the hum of servers and an empty chair. Because you are not an amateur. Paranoia is the cardinal virtue of a hacker. You had installed micro cameras on the streetlights of the entire block. You saw the black vans without license plates 3 minutes before they braked. From the roof of a distant building, you observed the scene with binoculars. You watched how they dragged your parents out like criminals for the simple crime of loving you. You watched as your perfect life crumbled in real time. You had lost everything again, but this time you had the truth on your hard drive. Now you are a ghost. You live in transient motels with cockroaches as roommates, stealing Wi-Fi from cheap coffee shops. But while your body hides, your mind travels to the depths of the most secure server in the world. With every layer of encryption you break on your laptop, you realize that the list of CIA agents was only the tip of the iceberg. What lay beneath was not information. It was the architecture of modern horror. You found folders with code names that sounded like science fiction movies, but whose results were real tragedies. You saw the blueprints for massive media manipulation campaigns. You discovered that the news people see on television are not reports of reality, but scripts written in Langley months before they happen. And then there were the accidents. Opposition politicians who suffered sudden brake failures in their cars, or curious journalists who decided to commit suicide by shooting themselves twice in the back. The creativity of the agency regarding death was admirably macabre. But the file that really froze your blood was the one related to the war on drugs. For years they sold you the story that the American government was fighting against the cartels. The documents said the opposite. They were not fighting. They were managing. There was irrefutable proof that the agency funded and armed certain criminal groups to destabilize governments in Latin America and maintain political control. Chaos was not a mistake. It was the strategy. Now you had in your hands the power to bring down empires. Your first impulse was that of a desperate son, to call them and demand an exchange. Your parents for your silence. But your logical brain intervened. You knew that one does not negotiate with terrorists, especially when the terrorists have government badges. If you tried to negotiate alone, you would not be a partner. You would be a loose end. Your voice, no matter how loud you screamed, would be silenced with another unfortunate accident. To survive and save your parents, you needed to stop being a lone wolf. You needed amplifiers. You needed allies who had as much to lose as you did. The game had changed. It was no longer hacking. It was asymmetric warfare. You cut your hair in a public bathroom and swapped your brand name clothes for second-hand rags. Now you are invisible. You move from one cheap cafe to another using insecure public Wi-Fi networks, jumping from one IP address to another before the CIA algorithms can triangulate your position. Did you know that a single man against the empire is suicide? You needed allies. First, you sought legitimacy. You found a veteran investigative journalist, a man who was once respected until he asked the wrong questions about the defense budget and the government destroyed his career. Now he was a professional corpse writing on a blog that nobody reads. You sent him an appetizer, a low-level classified document, but real enough to prove your identity. He took the bait instantly. He replied begging for a face-to-face meeting. But you are not stupid. In the world of espionage, physical meetings are traps. You rejected his request coldly. Communication would be text only, encrypted and ephemeral. He accepted. You already had your narrator. Now you needed brute force. You dove into the darkest forums of the net, places where you do not enter with a normal browser. You contacted a syndicate of cybercriminals. They were not hacktivists with ideals. They were digital mercenaries who stole credit cards for sport. The negotiation was tense. They did not want money. They wanted power. You offered them the jewel of the crown. Files with the dirty laundry of American senators who controlled cybersecurity laws. In exchange, they had to lend you their immense network of bots to amplify your message when the time came. The deal was closed. You had the truth in one hand and a global megaphone in the other. The chessboard was set. It was time to stop hiding and make the call that nobody in Washington wanted to receive. It was time to negotiate with the devil. You took a deep breath and dialed the number. The voice on the other end of the line did not sound like a monster. It sounded like a bored bureaucrat. They told you they wanted to cooperate, that the safety of your parents was their priority. They almost convinced you, but then your trained ear noticed something. A slight delay in the audio. It was not a bad connection. It was a routing loop. They were not negotiating. They were buying time to triangulate your exact position through the cell phone towers. You hung up the phone and the survival instinct took control. You shot out of the cafe, jumping onto your motorcycle. Your intuition was prophetic. As soon as the engine roared, 3 black vans closed off the street in a perfect pincer formation. The agents got out with long guns, but you were already a blurry smear on the horizon. The hunt began. They had V8 engines and tactical training. You had desperation and a deep knowledge of the urban infrastructure. The vans were gaining ground on the straightaways, their armored bumpers inches from your rear wheel. You knew you could not beat them in speed, so you decided to beat them with intelligence. You remembered something that most people ignore. Modern cities run on systems, industrial control technology from the 80s that has almost no security. Days ago, you had scanned the city traffic network and found a back door open wide. You approached the largest and most dangerous intersection in the city. With a pre-programmed command on your phone, you sent the signal. The latency was 0. In your lane, the light turned bright green. In the cross lanes, you forced another simultaneous green. You crossed the intersection at 100 kilometers per hour. Behind you, the world turned into noise and twisted metal. Civilian cars, obeying their own green lights, crashed sideways into the sea of vans that were chasing you, creating an unthinkable barrier of steel and smoke. While the sirens and horns filled the air, you disappeared into the alleys, protected by the chaos you had just orchestrated. The adrenaline of the escape quickly turned into poison. You were furious. If they wanted to play dirty, you would burn the board. From your hideout, you activated the Scorched Earth Protocol. You sent the decryption keys to your allies, the journalist and the cybercriminal syndicate. You sat down to wait for the media apocalypse. You waited 1 hour, 2 hours, nothing. The internet remained the same. The silence was more terrifying than the sirens. You tried to contact the journalist. No answer. You tried to hack his smart home security, but everything was disconnected. Offline. That confirmed your suspicions. Quickly, you accessed the Wi-Fi network of the apartment across the street and took control of his video doorbell. The neighbor and Oppo's camera gave you the perfect angle. The journalist and Oppo's door opened, and you saw 3 men in biohazard suits carrying black industrial bags come out. They were not forensic police. They were erasers. They had eliminated the messenger and were taking him out in parts as if he were medical waste. Terrified, you turned to your last card, the group of cybercriminals. You sent them an emergency message demanding the attack, but instead of a confirmation, your personal firewall began to scream. Red alerts. They were not attacking the government. They were executing a reverse trace to your location. In that instant, reality hit you. You had committed the classic rookie mistake, believing that honor exists among thieves. The government simply made them a better offer. They bought their loyalty, and your head was part of the payment. You were alone, betrayed, and cornered. You no longer sought to negotiate. You sought mutually assured destruction. From a server routed through 12 countries, you pressed the enter key. In an instant, terabytes of dirty data flooded the inboxes of the BBC, CNN, Al Jazeera, and every major newspaper on the planet. But did you know that editors could be silenced? You needed something they could not ignore. You hacked the outdoor advertising management systems in Times Square, in Shibuya, in Piccadilly Circus. The giant screens stopped showing ads for soft drinks and began broadcasting the classified documents. You interrupted live broadcasts of television shows and soccer matches. For 3 glorious minutes, you forced the world to look the truth in the face, but every data packet sent was a digital breadcrumb. By making yourself so visible, you became the brightest lighthouse in the electromagnetic spectrum. The sound of sirens was replaced by something more sinister, the beating of helicopter blades. You got on your bike and accelerated, trying to lose yourself in the urban labyrinth. You saw a narrow alley, too tight for their armored vans. You thought it was your escape route. You accelerated into the darkness believing you had outsmarted them. Error. You were not escaping, you were being herded. The alley was not an exit. It was a tactical funnel. Upon reaching the end, you found not freedom, but a wall of shields and blinding lights. They had studied your routes, predicted your movements, and prepared the ambush before you even started the bike. A flash, a dull impact, and then darkness. The game was over. They caught you. You sat in the back of the armored van, handcuffed hand and foot. Your mind calculated the probabilities of survival in a federal maximum security prison. The result was 0. You had resigned yourself to spending the rest of your days seeing the sun through bars. But fate had one last plot twist. Suddenly, the world shook. An 18-wheeler cargo truck came out of nowhere and rammed the convoy, blocking the road like a wall of steel. Did you hear shots? They were not the messy shots of a gang, but the precise and methodical rhythm of professionals. There were screams, then silence. The rear doors swung open, letting in a blinding light. 2 silhouettes were outlined against the sun. One wore dark sunglasses. The other checked an assault rifle. The one with the glasses looked at you like someone inspecting merchandise. He asked, "Is this the brat?" The other nodded. "It is him. Let us go, kid. If you do not move fast, you stay here for the coroners." You had no choice. You got into their black vehicle with no plates while the car accelerated, leaving the chaos behind. Finally, you spoke. "Who are you? Why are you helping me?" The 2 men looked at each other. "We are like you," said the driver. "People who saw the strings that move the world and were betrayed for cutting them." You smiled with a bit of pride despite the fear. "Well, then we won," you said. "I published everything. The documents are in Times Square on the news. The world already knows the truth. The government will fall tomorrow." The 2 men burst into a dry and cruel laughter. The one with the sunglasses shook his head and handed you a lit tablet. "Look," he said. You looked at the screen with horror. There were no riots in the streets. There were no impeachments. The global headlines spoke of the divorce of a famous actress and a new dance challenge on social media. Your classified documents had been labeled as conspiracy theories generated by artificial intelligence and buried by the algorithm in less than 10 minutes. "Nobody cares about the truth, kid," said the man with the glasses. "People prefer a comfortable lie to a complicated reality." The game was rigged from the start. You felt an emptiness in your stomach more painful than any blow. Your sacrifice was worth nothing. The system not only controlled crime, it controlled the perception of reality. "You have 2 options," the man continued. "You can get out here and let the CIA find you in an hour. Or you can come with us and learn to play the game for real from the shadows, where nobody applauds but where it really matters." You looked out the window. The world kept turning, indifferent to your tragedy. You nodded slowly. Your new life had just begun. That is all for today. I will make similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.